you have a lot of attachments in the past, and that guides who you are as a human being. Our goal is to help people understand that if you can be wildly curious as you were as a kid, that you'll be wildly successful in life.
Everyday Americans right now are living in these echo chambers. I don't feel I'm living in an echo chamber. I surround myself with people that have those different viewpoints. It's really hard to make other people be that way. How do you plan to do that?
When you start to dismantle your own thought processes, you realize that you don't know shit. People that really get this, you're seeing them change the world faster than it's ever changed before.
Aaron, you're starting to coin the phrase, thinking is dangerous. What exactly does that mean?
That's funny. No, in all reality is we far have programmed ourselves to overthink everything in the world today. We have too much information in our hands. So in essence, people go out in the world and they think they know something. And so they're acting on their thoughts instead of going with their intuition. I think in all of history, going with your gut or going with your heart is much better than going with your head.
But you're a keynote speaker, you're an entrepreneur, you're a comedian, you've advised heads of state, the Puerto Rican president. There's got to be some thinking associated with that, no?
No, when you get down to it, you realize, realize that you don't know shit. And I say that really politely is, there's a lot of people out there in the world that, you know what you know. You know what you don't know. Like, do you have a PhD in physics?
No.
Okay, you know that. But you don't know what you don't know. So, Austin, I ask you, what percentage of the world's knowledge do you know?
Probably less than 1%. And that's probably being generous.
Right. Everyone out there in the world definitely know less than 1%. Einstein's like, I know nothing. The fact is that people walk around and they act like they know everything, and they literally miss every opportunity in front of them. When you say I don't know shit, and I always say this is the name of my next book, is I don't know shit. It's the power of knowing you know nothing, writing with Forbes Shannon. Our goal is to help people understand that if you can be wildly curious as you were as a kid, that you'll be wildly successful in life. So many politicians out there in the world act like they know, yet they need to listen and be curious and understand what's going on in today's world, because we're in a place that we've never been before. And the fact of the matter is that any executive or any leader that I've ever worked with or coached, and I've coached CEOs of $10 billion companies.
Yep.
When you get down to it and you boil down what you realize is that they're off their own lived experience. They're off their own perspective and point of view that is only limited by their own belief system that they have installed in themselves. So as everything is a mirror and you start to look out in the world and you're navigating through it, the best thing you can do is say, I don't know shit, and continue to learn and grow. Because we either grow or die, Austin. I mean, like, there's a lot of people that are heading towards death with certainty. And the one thing I can give you about certainty is that it does not exist. It's like a pro forma in a startup. You're never going to hit it. You're going to exceed it or you're not going to hit it.
Your resume kind of speaks for itself, though. You have to know something. So when you're advising a lot of these people, what are they paying you for if you don't, quote, know shit?
They're paying for the curiosity that they don't have in themselves. Like, at the end of the day, when you start to dismantle your own thought processes, you realize that you have a lot of attachments in the past, and that guides who you are as a human being. And then in the present, you're fighting reality with resistance. Reality wins every time, Austin. There's no winning against reality. Putting pressure against something doesn't mean it. So if you're in an argument, that argument is to help you realize and learn about yourself something. Because your reality and my reality will never be the same. Think of us as universes colliding with each other and we're negotiating a new reality. We're never going to see the world the same. Just like two twins, one could look at snow and say, it's so beautiful. The other could say it's horrible. And then you get down to it, you realize the person that says it's horrible got caught in a snowstorm at one time. That part of it is letting go of the fact that, whatever is presented to you is an opportunity to learn and grow. And most people are arguing against their point of view or their perspective in the world and they're draining so much energy. I'm all about the brain. If you think about neuroscience, it's about finding the most efficient energy. The brain just uses efficient energy. It's not there to tell you the truth. It's literally to just keep you alive and procreate. Honestly, it's just there to keep you alive long enough to procreate. When you realize how the brain works and neuroscience, then you start letting go of the fact that your ego is your comfort zone. Doesn't mean it's comfortable. It's just your norm. It's the shit you've been living in. And I have a little analogy about a red wagon that, as a little boy, when you're a little boy, did you ever have a radio red flyer wagon?
Oh, yeah. I think most of us did.
Yeah. So what you had when you were there, when you're 5 years old, did you go out and play with it?
Absolutely.
Okay. You didn't know we were going to have this conversation, did you?
No, but let's talk about it.
So you're pulling this wagon around, and that one day you might say, I want to be a rocket scientist. And that wagon helped you become that. The next day you might say, I'm a rock star. The next day you might say, I want to play with Barbies. I have no idea. But you were able to create anything from nothing. Now, go along. They say, hey, Austin, you're never going to be in the NBA. You're never going to be a professional basketball player. So sooner or later, you start striking off all these things that people have told you who you are. And now you're sitting in that chair responsible for being there because every decision in your life has brought you to this moment right now. And that's where when you look back at that red wagon, when someone said, hey, you're not going to do this, that was a pile of shit. And that fell on the sidewalk. But you looked at it and you said, that's mine. And you shoveled it up and put it in your wagon. Sooner or later, you're a teenager. You're out there realizing it's your own individual. And you hit a little bump on the sidewalk and some of that shit falls out. Instead of letting it go, you're like, that's my shit. So whatever your parents did, they were doing the best they could, but they might have said something that really framed your whole reference in life. And instead of letting it go, you go pick that up and put it back in your wagon. You keep it along. Now, metaphorically, you have this wagon that's overflowing with shit. And people are carrying that around. And you see it in our politicians, you see it in our CEOs. No one doesn't have a wagon full of shit because they're all holding on to something that they're attached to in their background that they keep as their identity. When you start realizing that you need to let go of that I don't know shit, is when you start realizing that a lot of what you think you know was programmed before you were able to actually kind of think about what that meant to you. But you're living through that again and again. Same with politics. Most people follow their parents' politics. They don't actually ask the questions that matter to them. And that's where, as Americans, it's our responsibility to go out there and kind of challenge the political system to say, what does this mean to me? There is no one on this planet, and unfortunately, like you see it in the news, that someone that just believes what Trump does. Like, I'm a Trump fan. I believe in everything he says. You just gave up your identity when there's no one that believes everything that he's done is the right thing. Can you vote for someone because you don't believe everything? You have to, because there's no candidates out there that are going to give you the choices that are going to align just with you. Then people start to make it their own. They pile his shit in their wagon, and then they start defending his point of view without ever thinking about it for themselves and what it means to them. Go through life, when I say I don't know shit, is that the power of knowing you know nothing, is then you start being curious about, okay, in reality, why am I arguing for my point of view when I know that you have a different point of view? What could I learn and grow from your point of view? Too few politicians are sitting across from a table each other, learning from each other and growing and having public conversations. Oh man, I'm missing the guy's name in Kentucky, the guy, Mitch McConnell. So I was sitting in Mitch McConnell's office, and this was probably 15 years ago. And Mitch McConnell said, you know where politics broke down? And this is, the former leader of the Republican Party. And he said, where politics broke down is when jet airplanes came about. This guy has been so long in DC that he said, when we were able to go home, and we had to go home to kind of literally get votes for the next election because it was always happening. So everybody started leaving DC on the weekends to go home. Thursday night out, Sunday night, Monday morning in. He goes, back before that, Democrats and Republicans would go to the Congressional Congress, to the country club, Congressional Country Club, or one of the other country clubs, and they would have lunch and golf, and they would talk about different things, and they would solve problems. But they lost those relationships, and then the media got involved and poisoned those relationships. Now we have a system that doesn't talk to each other and is being polarized. When you realize that we need to solve things as Americans, seeing both sides of the perspective. You know, one of the greatest quotes that I have in my book, Exponential Theory, is the ability to hold the first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold two opposing thoughts at the same time. That's F. Scott Fitzgerald. We're not able to do that. We're not able to learn the other side. We only see one side of the perspective because our shit is so packed in, because we're so attached to that identity. When the reality, if you think about the world today, is how do I take Austin and actually remove the identity that you live and you think you know who you are, and you start to say, I am the character in this game of life, but I'm also the director. So right now I'm the director, as I could remove myself from the character and understand that all this shit doesn't define me. And I could actually remove myself further and realize, oh my God, I'm the writer of my story. And as you know, I've written books and you've written books, and you start to write your own story. You start to get deliberate about who you're going to be. Now you have to deal with all that attachment to let it go. You have to stop resisting life to understand that if things keep presenting themselves, it's because you're resisting them. And then you have to look to the future and say, how is this going to unfold? It's because you remove the glass ceiling or the ceiling that you put on yourself to say, what is limitless? And once I realized that, to your point, is like saying I don't know shit and then I'm having fun. It's really not that serious. You just have to go through life and understand when you're so focused on one thing, you miss all the peripheral awareness and opportunities so that you can go through life and literally you're a spectator of yourself to say, what are the opportunities presenting myself? And now I just go through life and I have this wild opportunity to kind of bump into people, help them. And now with the network I have, I just connect people and weave it just like you do. And that's why we've gotten along for so long is like, you realize that it's just like building this massive network that I can get anything done, but it has nothing to do with me. It has the idea that I've dealt with my shit. I'm not fighting reality, so I'm very aware. So when someone comes to me and say they need help, I know 5 people that I can basically introduce them to and open the door for them, as you do. And I think that's why we've done so many things together over the years, is because we see this unlimited potential of just being human beings and not being someone that regurgitates and acts like they know it all. Because I don't know it. I mean, in all reality, you just said you know less than 1%. I've said that to tens of thousands of people. There's nobody that's ever said they know more than 1%. So then why do we walk around acting like we know it all?
Aaron, is your superpower the curiosity piece of this? Is that what you believe?
Yeah, I believe curiosity and communications are the key to success. And those are the 2 things that I've focused my whole life on building the skills in, being a master communicator and then just being absolutely curious to everybody I meet.
So you do know how to communicate.
I think so.
Okay. So you know that. We'll
Yeah.
establish a baseline. You know how to communicate.
Well, you tell me.
I think you communicate pretty well.
Well,
but I think other
my ex-wife
people,
and my girlfriend might argue that.
well, relationships are a different story. It's a whole different level of communication. But professionally speaking, there's a lot of power deals you have brokered in your career and a lot of powerful people from both a wealth perspective, but a political perspective. You have worked with, you've defended in some cases, you've served as their PR storm at different times. Talk to me a little bit about a tough situation where your curiosity was too much and the client pushed back.
You know, the interesting thing is when you have clients like I do, which, you know, like you said, people that, you know, run islands or billionaires that
Those are the type of clients you work
professional
with.
sport teams
Okay.
or CEOs of, you know, $10 billion energy companies. You realize that curiosity serves you well. These are all people that have put themselves in situations that inherently have a lot of yes people around them. And what I've never been is a yes person, including partners I've had in foundations and different things, is like telling people the thing that's uncomfortable because you're curious is what serves you the best. Thinking that you know what's best for them is a sure way to hit the exit door. Giving them the options because you're curious of all the different opportunities and helping them make the decision, but not making it for them, is going to help you be a great advisor. coaching people to understand that this wagon full of shit that people carry around, that if I am able just to get a few pieces of shit, I can break people free to literally create unlimited opportunities for themselves. And as a coach, as a facilitator, as a speaker, that's what I've gone out and been able to create over and over again. That's the repeatable, predictable, scalable, sustainable model that I've created for myself.
Is to make people extraordinary.
To make people extraordinary. Because we're all ordinary people until we're able to tell an extraordinary narrative about ourselves. And the fact is just even your questions are extraordinary narratives for me that, yes, I've lived an extraordinary life. I've been to 103 countries, all 50 states. I've seen things that most people haven't. I've worked with world leaders. I've worked with, 50 plus CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. I've been in rooms with Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, and I've had these experiences that have allowed me to be someone that is curious. If I were to act like I knew it all to any one of those people, I wouldn't be in those rooms. So the fact that I stayed curious allowed me to do that. Yet everybody walks around with a chip on their shoulder thinking they want to be validated by what they know. And the reality is none of us know very much. There's questions that we cannot answer on this earth. Einstein, known as probably the smartest person in the world, you can study him and realize he realized that the more he studied, the less he knew, the less he could answer. And that's where you have to be humbled. Just have fun. It's really not that serious. Let it unfold and understand that if you're not focused on one thing, you can see the opportunities in everything.
I think you make a good point too. It's people struggle answering that question. Who am I? Who do I want to be? I remember I met with Christine Jones, CFO of GoDaddy, for a very long time. She worked under Bob Parsons, one of Arizona's richest guys here. Christine asked me that question. She said, who do you want to be? And at first, I'm 20 years old, 19 at the time, actually, I think. And I'm like, oh, okay, I want to be rich. I want to be famous. I want to be president. And she goes, what do you want to be? And I said, well, I want to be a steward of people's resources. I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to own a company. I want to be the president. She goes, it's not what I'm asking you. And I stood there puzzled and I said, what are you asking? And I talk about this in the book. The final chapter is the segue really into this conversation we're having today. And she said, do you want to be a man of faith? Do you want to be a father? Do you want to be a husband? At that time at 19, I'm not really thinking about that stuff, but I think a lot of young people now are starting to look at their identities in different ways. And I think the banners that are up on Facebook and LinkedIn that describe who we are in a few words, folks are struggling to understand that. So Aaron, when you talk about who you want to be, when you're in these rooms with Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and a guy who sold his company for $10 billion, some of the world's most wealthy people, who are they? Do you ask them that question? Are you curious enough?
100%. No, that's why I'm in the rooms. But the people that I have been able to ask that question at that level, and I won't say I asked Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk. I was facilitating a conversation in a room they were in.
Talk to me about why you were facilitating the conversation.
Because I'm curious. Being a facilitator means that I can be in a room, and I think facilitation is the master communication skill. And it's why it's enabled me to do stand-up and to do improv and do comedy, as well as negotiations at the highest level. Because when you're facilitating, you're generally facilitating, say, 20 people. And you got to connect with each one of them, and you got to pull out the best out of each one of those people. And every one of them has a bigger ego than you could ever imagine. They all have a point of view that they're anchored in. So to be curious is to ask questions at the right time to make sure that they engage in the conversation so they share something of value. That is a feeling of, candidly, that's when I don't know shit. Yeah. Because I go with my intuition and gut and I feel the energy in the room and I literally navigate, not through thinking. That's where I think thinking is dangerous. Go back to how you open this up. It's where I was understanding how to get into flow state and basically letting the energy go through me. Because we're just energy. If you look at human beings as energy, you'll get a much better understanding of them. Mm-hmm. If someone's a dick or someone's an asshole, they don't have good energy.
Yeah.
They'll only take them so far in life. And honestly, you have to realize they're miserable because they're that.
Yeah.
I just want to be, so to your point about labels, is we're not our labels. Most people want to define themselves so tightly that they can't move or be aware. I just want to be a good human. At the end of the day, I want people to say, like, I really enjoyed my relationship with Aaron. I had fun. I laughed. He really didn't take it seriously. He made me lighten up. He made me think a little bit differently. He made me feel something. And when you do that, then I think people invite you back into the room because you don't have an agenda to say, I'm going to extract something from them. And that's what the beauty of being a facilitator, if I could help the world do anything, is like create the skill of facilitation. Because like at the end of the day, you're literally meeting these people. When you're facilitating this, and facil means to make things easy, I'm just making people's life easy by pulling out with them what is their best thing that they do. Like you in particular, like you're this incredible master network that at a young age had a tremendous amount of responsibility, raised significant capital. You have as many or more relationships as billionaires that I do. And that's where we've been blessed into a network of people that they trust us for different reasons, but for the same reason. We don't necessarily have an agenda. We're building relationships that are deep out of curiosity and helping them find the things that they need in life, which nobody else is. Everybody else is wanting to extract out of everybody something. And when you stop that, when you start to have like a childlike wonder, that's what I am. Like I'm a big kid now, and I realize I just want to grow young. I don't have any desire to grow old. I'm into longevity and living a long, long life. And it's like the best way to do, and I say you either grow or die. I'm growing at the fastest pace I ever. In the last 6 months, I've probably grown 60 years of life with augmented intelligence, which is what I call AI, but also just the fact that I'm looking at the world differently and I'm curious, and it's just accelerating everything in my life into a place that I'm able to leverage all the relationships I've had, but not in the way that it matters to me. It's the fact that I'm helping those people get where they want to go, and that along the way is opening the doors for me to bigger and bigger, better pastures.
How does that authenticity translate to achievement?
If you're not authentic, everybody knows it. We can look at politicians that run in a
How do we know it though?
no, in a primary. If you see someone in a political pursuit against their same party, they're going to have very, very different messaging that they don't believe in, and you can feel it. Trust your gut. This is where thinking's dangerous because you'll believe anything that someone says if they say it enough, but feel it. You can judge people when you look someone in the eye and actually feel, do they believe in what they're saying? Are they going to follow through on what that is? And that's where you could take Trump, for example, in his first term versus his second. He's much more comfortable in his skin now than he was. He was over his skis. He didn't expect to win. He didn't expect, and then all of a sudden he had people around him. He was searching to figure out, how do I be a president?
You think he really did not think he was going to win?
Oh, 100%.
Which, the first time or the second time? Or
The first
third?
time. I don't think he ever thought. Yeah. No,
So
I
then
think
why do you think he did it? Why did he run?
he had the belief system that he would. He had the belief system since he was in his 20s. It was always a big goal. It was always a belief system that he had for himself. Did the polls or anyone say that he was going to? No, he overcame odds. And that's where you realize is like energy is everything. He won it from the energy of belief, where his opponents may have not had that. And if we look at human beings as energy, it's not necessarily that the energy has to be like for good, but it is like when you think bigger, and that's where my first book, Exponential Theory, because I was in these rooms with all these people, the power of thinking big is when you think bigger, you attract things to it. Everybody wants to work for someone that has a big idea. Elon Musk, I truly don't believe that he thinks he's going to colonize Mars in 2040. And there are interviews that would say he has doubts of that. But he created such a big idea because he has a childlike wonder. And now he's created every other company in his portfolio to say, how would I do it? Well, I need a boring company because we can't build it on service. I need a solar company because we need to leverage solar. I need an electrical car company if we're going to do transportation. I need a communications platform so we can do this. I'm going to rename it X, which is my original PayPal. So we're going to have a way to basically use currency. If you think of all the different things that he's done, he's just playing a game, and now he's worth $500 trillion because he's playing a bigger game than all of us. And it doesn't matter what anybody else believes. It won't matter he believes. And I used to use Donald Trump as an example. Is like, this guy's box is just bigger than everyone else's. We all put ourselves in a box. Before he was president, like way back in 2010, I used to use him in speeches and say, like, this guy's box is just bigger. And he doesn't care. And when you don't care, you can be yourself. Now you look at it, he's accomplished things that he's surprised of. And I know he's surprised himself. You can see it. And that's where you realize is like the reigner of the free world was able to do it because like now he's kind of settled in, he's authentically his beliefs. He's doing things that aren't necessarily conservative. They're not catering to the Republican Party.
What is conservative?
It's a good one. You tell me. That's a changing definition. I mean, it used to be fiscally responsible, small government. Now we can actually look at the past several conservative presidents and say that they spent a lot more money than our liberal friends. Mm-hmm. And that's where you realize that politics are changing very, very quickly. And that even the definition of what a politician is what I believe that'll be in the future is someone that is a master communicator and that is curious, someone that doesn't have all the answers. And you're starting to see that in political is to ask the questions so that they can honestly find new answers. They're starting to listen because I think listening is the skill of the future of being curious. Because when you are curious, and just like in sales, you got 2 eyes, 2 ears, 1 mouth. If you were to talk 20% of the time, there is proof that you'll sell a considerable amount more. The same with a politician, the same with communication on a company level is the number one issue in every company in America is communication, and it is human. And with AI, the one thing that AI is going to do that nobody's talking about is it's leveling the playing field where AI is not going to matter. But the only differentiator is being human. And that's what I'm really focused on is how to help people be more human, how people to tell their own stories that they're ordinary to extraordinary. That's the podcast Extraordinary Stories that I have is capturing the essence of people that had ordinary lives and decided to be extraordinary. Just like myself, I know I've had an extraordinary journey. I've been blessed beyond belief, just as you have. And that's where in a position that I want to create where people start to understand that they're in charge of their narrative. They're not the person or the character in this show. I'm not the one that's had all this stuff happen to me, good or bad. I don't have to make meaning of it. I'm the person that gets to observe it. And once I observe it, I'm able to rewrite the meaning of that. It doesn't mean I rewrite what happens, but it's like my English teacher when I was a senior in high school flunked me. And she said, "You're going to amount to nothing." The second thing she said, "You're going to go to summer school." So both things for a while I believed, and I did go to summer school. So that wasn't true. What ended up happening is that propelled me forward to basically write several books. And now I'm with a couple other colleagues, Forbes Shannon and Christine Butler, writing books, which we've worked on with books on you and different things, is expanding the future, by helping people narrate their ordinary into extraordinary. And that to me is the most compelling thing that I can do in this world. Because when you change one mind at a time, I say world peace, one mind at a time, because when I get people to empty their wagons and they focus on their future and they literally break their glass ceilings and I'm around them, we now see extraordinary results from people. And I do that over and over again. I have a repeatable, predictable model that I go into companies and do that. I go into politicians, and it's the same thing. Doesn't matter who it is. No matter who you are, you can communicate better, you can be more curious, and you can think bigger.
So you know how to teach people how to be human.
Be human.
So you do know something.
I do know something.
All right. That's a good something to know.
Yeah.
Let's talk about your red wagon.
Yeah.
So are you teaching these powerful people how to unpack that wagon? Is that part of your system of change you're creating here?
Yes.
Okay.
It's detachment. It's to understand that you have a lot of stories that serve you well and some that don't serve you well. Unfortunately, human beings, being the flawed humans that we are, meaning we're not perfect. In fact, we don't want perfection. Mm-hmm. We don't like someone that looks perfect that stands on screen. We may admire something about them, but what we see is like Cindy Crawford's mole. Now I'm aging myself talking about a supermodel that has a mole that's 60 years old.
You just gained 60 years on your life, so go for it.
Yeah. So in that, you start to look at is like people are looking for flaws. In fact, we fall in love with flaws. We don't fall in love with perfection. We're not going to fall in love with robots. We're going to fall in love with the flaws of robots. We're going to fall in love with the fact that nothing is perfect and that we have to learn and grow from that, because in that gray space, that's where we're human. The difference between AI and humans that I think is most when I teach people is like AI has to have an outcome and it has to have an answer. Humans oftentimes are looking just to expand their minds so they understand something greater, but they're not certain about their future. They're curious about their future. AI is not curious about anything. It has an answer to everything. AI, I don't know how it teaches that. They can have it look at lava lamps and say, like, create randomness and say, how do we do that? It's still looking for randomness to create an answer. Humans can live their whole lives and not have a purpose, but like find in that search for the purpose is the driving factor. I believe like the meaning of life, and this is where, the nugget that I give to the CEOs is it's the awareness of being aware of awareness. Because you realize we're put on this earth as players of the game, but we're also the director of that player, and we're also the writer of that player. So when you look at how a movie is made, you're the main character in your movie. Unfortunately, a lot of people play that they're the NPC they're the non-playing character of the show. They just play where the world goes by them. You and I are main characters. We know that we create our futures by the way that we think, the way that we feel, the way that we take action, those stories that we tell ourselves. And when we do that, we become the writer of our story. So our narration of what we want to be in the future, or any politician or anything, and that's where Donald Trump has always been writing his story. And that's where he wrote The Art of the Deal, which was one of the first books I ever bought. And now he's literally writing new stories about how even politics works, as Barack Obama did with executive orders and everything. You look at the changing nature of all that, we realize that we're in a place that we're thinking more exponentially, and you're seeing people that really get this, and this is what I've studied, you're seeing them change the world faster than it's ever changed before. And that's where you look at these exponential organizations that I've worked with, all of them, the Google, the Facebooks, Microsoft, the Teslas. I've been in and out of those companies facilitating. You start to realize there's a different mindset in those companies. There's a different mindsets with a politician that's going to win a race and one that doesn't know they are. There's a different mindset that one that thinks they're going to lose, but they're just trying to leverage it to get somewhere. You know that by looking at them. But as human beings are, as flawed as we are, we sell ourselves on the belief that something's going to happen that's not going to happen. And that's just like being salespeople. I go into a lot of sales organizations and help sales teams really create the belief system that they could sell. But it first comes as like, as humans, stop lying to yourself of what's going to happen and just believe what you can create. And once you do that, and that shift to that is that you recognize that, you lean into your flaws. Like, we're not perfect. When the beauty of it is that we get to share that with the world and people get to learn from that. And that's where every human being on this planet, my son included, that has a learning disability, he is my mentor. I learn more from him than anyone because he shows me a different perspective to look at that I would never think of. And it's because he doesn't act like he knows shit. And that has helped me think like, oh, okay, I need to stop thinking that I know shit.
Are American voters curious?
American voters are not curious. No, that's
Why?
the problem. We need to make American voters curious.
How do you do that?
I think part of it is challenging the system to understand. And we've talked about it extraordinary is like people are often voting for things they don't even believe in, that aren't even their belief system, but they're voting in because of the people around them, because you are your 5 closest friends. You're also, if you're young, you're probably very much by your teachers, your parents, the education system. As Charlie Kirk was going out to educate the education system that is very tilted towards a liberal point of view. How do you get people to think for themselves? And when I say thinking is dangerous, it's the fact that people are not thinking in a way that are challenging their own thoughts. They're thinking in a way that's dangerous, that they don't challenge what they hear. They just accept what they hear. In reality, I remember when the internet came along, they're like, oh, well, only 70% of the internet's accurate. Now with AI, and you realize all these different points of view is like, what's accurate, what's real? We have no idea anymore. And that's where people are dead set on believing something that they hear without thinking about it. They're just believing it. So it bypasses the thinking. And that's where you get to a place is that you get emotionally attached to a candidate because they fit some kind of moniker that some other group of people have shared with you. But if we challenge everything, then we'd have real conversations about real issues. And we'd actually start challenging those real issues in a way that we'd solve for those problems. Right now, we don't, because we're a herd mentality that's just literally following the crowd. And we're never going to get there to solve these problems. We're only going to polarize it even more. And I think about this as I have, 4 kids that I'm responsible for to kind of bring up, and inheriting a new future is I'm not happy about what they're inheriting. So I want to change that. And the only way we're going to change that is to make people more critical thinking. As you know, I'm writing a book with former Governor Rossello about perverse incentives. A system was meant to work, like healthcare is to keep healthy. As it progressed in the 50s, when we started figuring out, okay, we need some kind of healthcare, you started realizing that we started dealing with chronic pain in a very different way. And then we realized that the money was in chronic illnesses, not in necessarily just getting anything. Healthcare system improved so much because it started to learn how sanitation worked, just washing our hands and putting ourselves in a safe place. But what didn't help is that we got people addicted to pain medicines that just mask the problems. Well, we didn't get to a proactive place, which we're starting to with biohackers and a lot of people that I'm friends with in the longevity space that are now saying, okay, the system's broken because of perverse incentives. If we have single payers that pay only based on the fact that you have to be sick, you have to prove it. And the only other one thing is if you have cancer, you can have preventative. If you're heading down a road to get cancer, every other thing is like you have to have it, prove that you have it to get reimbursed for it. That is a sick care system, not a healthcare system. We have to create the right incentives to dismantle that. And that's where Governor Rossello and I want to create an academy for young politicians to literally understand what is a perverse incentive and how to actually destabilize perverse incentives so that the voters can get behind that and make the changes. And as you know, I was involved in No Labels, which was the group that was looking for a third party president or third candidate that would be either Republican or Democrat, and they would go to market and potentially beat our former two presidential candidates. They were not successful. They were flawed as humans in their effort, and they have gained momentum to understand how that could possibly work and how that could work in the future. To me, it's literally looking at these perverse incentives and understand that whether you're Republican or Democrat, we have to solve for these problems and think bigger about ourselves. And it has to be bigger than our party. And we have to start looking about how to, be curious about the other side so that we can actually think bigger about what we're accomplishing instead of doing what we were doing is putting single partisan bills out there. And just because someone has favor, because all we're doing is we're playing pendulum. We're swinging this rubber band back and forth and it's hitting us every time. We're saying, hey, we're going to do it this way. And then it swings back the other way. And that's the problem with politics today because people aren't curious. Because if we were curious, we'd actually think bigger about these issues and we come up with bigger solutions. I do believe we're moving into a place where we'll be curious because there is going to be an exhaustion of everybody thinking they know everything to understand if we know everything, then why the hell did we put us in this situation right now? Because this isn't what my grandkids, my kids, and so forth aren't inheriting a world that I'm proud of. And I just want to make people curious. That will solve our problems if we get curious. If we think we know it all, and we think we know it all from the perspective we have, and we don't want to understand anyone else's perspective, then we'll have situations like Charlie Kirk has exacerbated, where people are polarized to a way that they only see whatever is in their news channel, and it doesn't necessarily help us kind of create an opportunity to kind of unite, where that should have been a moment that united us. It literally created polarization. And we can see it again and again in all these different issues that are happening. We basically politicize them and use it to our advantage to say why you should be on our side. And we've now left a huge middle area of people that have common sense. So we don't realize as Americans have common sense that will sway the future because we start to see curiosity in the political system. That's my belief. That's what I'm writing about. That's the conversations that I'm having with my clients, whether they're investors in PACs or whether they're politicians themselves. I want to dismantle the perverse incentives in a way that we literally see this world have all different outcomes from it. And that's my own belief. And this is a belief system and a thought leadership that I can do that from my position because I can help influence those other people. And that belief will eventually take fire because I believe that. And that's just why Donald Trump eventually became, president of the free world.
Because his belief in curiosity.
Yes, because in himself, his belief in himself.
What makes the Puerto Rican governor qualified to teach other political people how to be curious?
He's got a fascinating story about being canceled. For those that don't know it, Governor Rossello was elected in a time in Puerto Rico where he became the governor, and they had a couple horrific hurricanes. So
Yeah.
he had to deal with a tragedy for an island where it is a territory, not a state. Donald Trump was able to come see him a couple different times. He had a lot of unique stories with those reactions. But as in Latin American politics, which are different than most state politics, there's multiple parties. There was several. That's not necessarily Democrat and Republic. There's different parties that represent a lot of different things. They barter, negotiate, and kind of figure out. And we know that system doesn't work all that well. I have a master's in Latin American studies and have spent a lot of time in Latin America, and you realize that Latin American politics are really dirty. Well, what happened is he had said some things that were true that were caught, and
What do you say?
he called a judge a bitch, and admitted to it, apologized. But what happened is all the different parties decided to say he was a misogynist, racist, homophobic, everything you could think of, and piled on. And they manufactured what they call Telegram Gate, which is they were basically able within a few months to dismantle his credibility in the public's eye in Puerto Rico
Because he used profanity.
because he said different things that were in text that were then leaked to the press that made him look as if he was someone he was not. So he ultimately ended up, Ricky Martin, who was a famous Puerto Rican, and 500,000 Puerto Ricans marched on San Juan with pictures of his head, with death threats of his kids, all because people weren't curious.
Yeah.
And basically created a movement to get him out. He had to leave the island. He obviously stepped down. He had a couple people in his cabinet that had got caught with some different things that had nothing to do with him, but someone in his health cabinet and another one. And so he was there to take blame. And we always want to blame the leaders. We don't want to blame the ones that are responsible for it.
But isn't that part of being in politics is you are to blame for all these things happening? Is that what
I think that's a problem about not being curious because we're
Yeah.
not solving problems. We're literally wanting to
blaming
blame
the one at the top?
But that's where like the political system is flawed because we always want to blame someone. We always want someone to hold when the reality is all of Americans, if we're having a true republic, that we're representative government, then we're in this together. We're not in this to blame the other party for not doing what they're doing. We're in this to make people think bigger and be more curious. And that's where my own role in the world, I think, is to help share that message. Is like, and it's a simple message: is if people realize that they don't know shit and they act like they do, they'll get a lot further in life because you're more curious. You'll be introduced to a lot more people. I have a belief system also that when I meet people, they introduce me to their most powerful people, and the people I know. So all of a sudden, I meet someone, and they're like, "Hey, Aaron, you need to meet so and so. And it's whoever they think is the most powerful person in their network. And that's enabled me to kind of grow my network very, very quickly.
And why do you think that is? Because you are an interesting person. Not a lot of people have done what you have in their careers and in life. You've traveled the world, you've visited 50 states, you've worked with the Puerto Rican governor, you've brokered deals with multi-billionaires. What makes you unique to where when I meet you, I want to introduce you to the most powerful person I know? What do you think is causing that?
I think, at the end of the day, they realize is that a lot of times people go in with answers, and that's where you're looking for a solution. But when you go in with curiosity, people realize that you can connect them with the solution. So my web that I've woven throughout my life has always been to benefit other people, whether it benefited me or not, just like you. And we've had that conversation, and we've helped famous comedians raise lots of money in a very short amount of time. You were very significant in helping introduce me to some people there, and I was able to make that happen. But it is the curiosity to understand is that you listen to people. I think so many people want to be heard, but they don't want to listen. And that goes to our politicians, but it goes to billionaires is, you're put in a box and you're very much defined with a label. And like I said, you're not your label. We're all human beings. We're all just energy. So when you break it down, you treat people that way. One, you're not nervous talking to them. I've been in rooms with, from Joe Biden to Senator McCain and had one-on-one conversations, and given my curiosity is to ask questions. The last thing those people want to do is, as a young kid, I was in those rooms to tell them what to do, but I gave them questions just like you are right now to make me think, to literally extend my thinking, to grow my thinking. And what everybody wants in this world is to think bigger about themselves, and they all want to be part of something that's bigger than themselves. And that's where, when you look at people attaching themselves to a political party or a person in a political party, you realize they just want something that's bigger than themselves.
Wouldn't we call that a movement?
We call it a movement, but what it is, it's blind faith and saying that I believe in everything that someone says. And back to Governor Rossello, that, here he is, got him pushed out of being governor. And, the thing that really helped him is he went away. 18 months later, independent journalists in Puerto Rico did an analysis of all these texts and realized that a good percentage of them were fake. They were made up, and the ones that were most damaging to him. So the Puerto Rican people, which half of them had moved off the island because of the hurricanes and the state after he left, he had put them in the financial balance and done some really incredible things while he was in office. He left 18 months later. They basically exonerated him, saying, hey, he didn't say all these things. So the Puerto Rican people, feeling bad, they have a shadow congressperson, because they don't have a congressperson for representing the territory, but they're allowed to have a person to kind of represent them in Congress that doesn't have a vote, but obviously can meet all these different people. A few weeks before, people said, let's write him in. So Governor Rossello was able to get written in as a third party and won the election of being the shadow congressperson. So he got redemption. So not many people get canceled and get redeemed. That story is incredible to me, because as you know, I've worked with sports owners that have been canceled that may never come back. There are things they could do to come back. And that's where I'm guiding them with curiosity, not necessarily with, I know the exact way to do it. Now, Governor Rossello, I'm working with him on this perverse incentives to answer the question you asked me previously is, he's a good man. He's a good father, a good husband. He represents a lot of the values that the American people want. He also understands, he's a PhD in stem cells. He's the biggest nerd you could ever meet. But also he's human. He realizes his flaws. And I think what him and I have built a relationship for is because I ask him questions that are curious, and he's able to think about things he's never thought about before. But he has thought about all the perverse incentives. After he left, he was basically tortured of what he could have done differently to have a different outcome, how he could satisfy all the different people. And there's little things like his biggest admission about it is, I worked too hard. And he said, I took it too serious. I got up at 3 a.m. because in Puerto Rico and Old San Juan, where the governor's office, the light came on. So everybody knew I was in the office, the first one in, and I was the last one out. But as someone who knows healthcare and longevity, we've been on the board of some stem cell clinics and different things. He's like, I didn't sleep. So I was making poor decisions. I was angry. I was hasty. So I wasn't doing everything right because I wasn't setting myself. I was taking it too serious. So him and I literally meet on the fact that it's really not that serious. And if you have fun with this life, it means that you can make positive change without being that serious about the change that you need to make. The fact is that he was able to kind of rebuild his reputation, and he'll continue to do that because now he's literally looking at these specific issues that he wants to solve for. And now he's saying, in the middle of the aisle, and the people that are independent or the people that are undecided, they want these issues solved. They're going to look to politicians to say, what are the perverse incentives so that we can solve for universal health care, or at least have a system that is fair, or that we can solve for the fact that any other issue in any other department in there, if you look at, he was offered through some connections I had, through RFK, he was offered a role with them. He decided not to take it because he sees the independent route and his foundation growing. And I've been with him fundraising on his foundation. People want to hear how we solve for these issues. They're tired of getting people that are literally just figureheads that believe strong extremes that are polarizing us. We need to solve for this in the middle. Otherwise, honestly, my grandkids are not going to have a good life because we're going to have a system where we owe so much. We have $1 trillion in interest payments right now. That could go up dramatically if our dollar does not if our dollar depreciates.
So-
Those things we have to think about now. And that's where, honestly, my own politics, like aside, we have to make some hard decisions right now so that we can have fun in the future. Because the fun's going to be over soon if we don't obviously address these issues.
You touch on something though, working tirelessly. That's a slogan a lot of politicians and leaders of very high profile nonprofit organizations say often. I will work tirelessly to get this done.
Yep.
But what you're saying is they should not work tirelessly.
No.
Now, if I'm in front of a donor and I'm asking him or her to invest in me, invest in my movement, in my project, they are going to expect me to work tirelessly. So, how do we change that mindset among people with powerful means?
Well, I think you're always right, Austin. I think the limiting beliefs or the ceilings that we put on ourselves, is that. I think someone that understands, like when people hire me, there's not a contract that I've ever said I'll work hours for you. Not a contract. I work in results. And I'm not saying 100% of the time I get the results. I'm human. I've had clients that I haven't done well for that have kept me on retainers for a long, long time because they got adjacent benefits from that. I've had clients that I've blown the results out of the water and been let go. In the end, you have to realize is your own limiting beliefs on yourself or what creates that. My relationship with people, if they believe that I have to work tirelessly for them. And I actually had a phone call today about this, an organization in Mexico that I represent that believed they wanted all this stuff from me for not that much value. And, I said, I can do it as long as you guys get out of your own way. You have to start helping me pave the way so that I can get these things done. Otherwise, your resistance, and this goes to my own strategy around having zero attachment, zero resistance, and zero limitations, past, present, future. When you're resisting my ability to get results, the results are not done through effort. You have time, money, and energy. They all could work so hard. It really is energy that works for you. So when you reshape someone's own belief system that they believe something's going to happen, you're no longer working for time or money. I don't work for time or money. I'm working for energy. I'm working for things that give me energy. And that's where sometimes people don't have good intentions. I'm not going to work for them very long. The zero asshole rule goes into effect. Like, I don't have to work for someone that's not going to treat me with respect, that's not going to understand it. So if I don't establish that when I actually meet with someone, then I have problems. And that may have been the problem that I had when I established this relationship in Mexico. But where this changes is I had a conversation today to say, hey, do you guys want me to be successful? Okay. Well, you're not paying me enough time that I'm going to work that many hours on this. So how are you going to help me be successful? What are the things that you can help me with to do that? And so then they started taking responsibility for different areas. And whether it's a donor or whether it's a politician or anything, I think there's always a give and take and exchange. And where people feel most empowered is when they give, not when they take. And that's where if people are used to working with people, letting them take, and that goes to billionaires, and I've worked with a lot of them, they'll take. But where I've had the biggest gain is a give and take. It's a relationship of curiosity that they're curious why I'm asking these questions, why I'm not just giving them an answer, telling them what they want to hear, why I'm not saying yes. And that's established. Like, a lot of people just want a yes person. They're not going to be successful because in reality, not one of us on this planet have any idea of we have this illusion of control that's in front of us. We don't know we have zero certainty. And that's where curiosity will help, is when I have a conversation with a donor or a billionaire that wants to accomplish something. I say, well, what certainty do you have on the future on this? And generally we start to get them where they don't know shit. And they become curious because they look at their future and I'm like, well, where are you going to be this afternoon? Or where are you going to be in a month? And they can never answer the question. Even though they have all the means in the world to answer that question, they're stumped. Well, how are you going to get there? And if you just act like a little kid and ask why, they actually start to get to some important answers for themselves. And that's so much more important than me giving an answer. So that curiosity that I help in them they start to say, well, why and how are you asking these questions? Because it's not in the answers. Everyone has a different answer, a different perspective from their point of view in the world. Like I said earlier, we're all bouncing around, bouncing in each other, colliding, and then we're negotiating our own reality. If we're curious, we start to learn how that all works. Now we start to build up some momentum because we ask questions, not because we have answers. And that's where I think it's renegotiating reality. I'm not arguing with someone. In fact, most of the time, I have extraordinary stories. And I think Forbes and we talked about this today with Christine. It's like, you know, are people extraordinary? It's up to them to decide if they're extraordinary. And that's where we can help them define that they're extraordinary. Because I've been around extraordinary people, but I've also been around people that have unlimited means, billionaires, that are pretty ordinary. And we know a lot of those same people. And they live a pretty mundane, boring life. And they're afraid and scared, and they think they know it all. And the problem is my quality of life is exponentially better because I don't know shit than it is if I sat there and thought that I knew it all. Have I learned a lot? I've learned how not to do things. In fact, I would say the thing I learned most from people is what not to do, not what to do.
But that's a big undertaking, Aaron. And maybe this is where we start to wrap up because I want to learn about your newest company. You're establishing this massive networking ecosystem you've created under that brand name Extraordinary, teaching American people to be curious, to empower them to be extraordinary. That's a huge undertaking. I mean, is it really possible to do? Do you think the human condition is capable of that evolution right now?
So, Austin, it comes down to is we've created America's a world built on consumption. We're built on credit. We're built on living outside of our means. And we're built on faking and being inauthentic in who we are so that we can prove ourselves to our neighbors that we don't even care about.
Yeah.
And when you look at that and you look at the average American, no, it's not possible. But our leaders, the 3% that can be curious and be creative, because there is a difference between I don't consume as much as I used to. And I'd love to say I don't consume. We're all consumers. We're all
I'll be
hunting.
honest, I am not a huge consumer. All the news that's out there, I used to read a lot, but it's so much noise. And we're living. Have you seen that new movie, Begonia, with Emma Stone?
Uh-uh.
Okay, you need to watch it
Begonia.
because, yeah, she was up for a couple Emmys or Golden Globes or something recently. But in the show, it's all about this guy that thinks she's this alien. I'm going to go off on a tangent for a minute, but I promise I have something here. Um, he thinks she's this alien. And so he plans with his cousin living in very low income poverty area. He plans with his cousin to kidnap her and for her to take them to her mothership. And so the movie is all about that journey. And as the viewer, you're sitting there watching it going, this guy's insane. There's no way he's an alien or she's an alien, that Emma Stone is an alien. And you're watching a part of American society evolve in this movie. You're seeing this guy who grew up poor, some sort of medical intervention by the government, killed his family. It's now killing his mother. And then his cousin is severely autistic. He has no idea what's going on. And so it's fascinating to see that you are convinced that this guy is not extraordinary. He's not curious. He doesn't know what the hell's going on. But the last 5 minutes of the movie, Emma Stone is actually an alien. And after she kills him, she goes up to the freaking mothership. And then you're just kind of mind blown that you think this guy's living in an echo chamber and he's hearing all these things. So obviously he's insane. He doesn't know what he's talking about. And everyday Americans right now are living in these echo chambers. To your point about consumption, I don't consume as much because I don't want to live in an echo chamber and make my decision off of something that someone says. Now, everybody knows I'm a big Trump fan. I'm a big fan of the president of the United States. I do think he's doing a good job. Not completely,
100%.
but he is.
Yep.
I don't feel I'm living in an echo chamber. I surround myself with people that have those different viewpoints. So maybe I'm different from the neighbor you talked about that's trying to put on a front to everybody else that he secretly doesn't care about. Whereas it's really hard to make other people be that way. And what I want to know is, how do you plan to do that?
Well, I think it goes to, you're either creating or you're consuming. And as you just said, the majority of Americans are consuming. And that's where you look at this creator economy that we're going into, and you look at the influence of, people that don't have depth and aren't necessarily authentic, but they have a voice because of Instagram or some social media network. What we're realizing, I think, today is they hold a lot more clout than they ever have before.
Absolutely.
And celebrities are even holding less clout, depending on what their social media is, than these individual influencers. And the consumers that consume them don't have their own opinions. What we need to create as Americans, and this is where leaders, is to have people help question, to have this conversation go on. Whether you believe in Trump or not, is that you have to look at, yes, he's doing good at some things, and there's some things he's not. As every individual and human being on this planet, you should never agree with anybody. That's consumption. If you just say, hey, I believe in everything this person says. Creativity is understanding that you have to create your own viewpoint on this world. You have to then go out and be curious about other people's point of view that are not yours. To your perspective is, it's having friends on both ends of the spectrum. Is like, we're all living in a spectrum. There's someone who's always going to be further right than you, and there's someone always going to be further left than you. Whether the same as any other spectrum, is religion or sexuality, there's always someone more gay and there's always someone more less gay. And then you start to realize, is like, why are you comparing yourself with anybody when you need to create your own belief system? But that's not your identity. The fact of the matter is we can all grow and change our minds because of something we learn. And that's where I've been opening my mind up to conspiracy theories and all kinds of things that I was dead set on, because I get new information and I'm like, oh my God, like, how did I have such a narrow point of view? It's the fact of the matter is that until, I was in my 20s, I thought that if you peed in a public pool that it turned purple, because that's what my parents taught me. So I never peed in a pool. And then one day I had too many beers and I peed in the pool and I looked down and it wasn't purple. So
To be honest, I used to think the same thing.
thank you.
Yeah.
I'm not alone. So
No.
like, this is the crazy conspiracy theories we live into, is we believe nonsense. Santa Claus is a consumer thing. Just think about the torture we put kids through. And it's like knowingly, but it's knowingly in the spirit of God. And the church just says, go do it. What are we doing? You have to start the question is, oh, this is all built on consumption, not on creativity. And that's where, if we start to ask the questions about anything in the world, we realize nothing is as it appears. And you know this, and I can say this in media, and just as everyone's portrayed, just as Trump has been portrayed, or Biden or anyone, there's truth and then there's not truth. And that's where you have to realize is no one has the truth. So you have to be curious. And that's where my goal of being on this podcast, or people in the Extraordinary Network themselves, is we want to be curious about each other, about how we're humans, not about our titles and our identities that we think are important. They're not important. We're all just energy and we're all growing. And if we grow a movement of people that are curious, then we become a matter of force and impact to make that contagion of curiosity, so that people start to communicate better because they ask more questions instead of think they know it all. And that's our only problem, is because we have echo chambers, people believe they know it all. I mean, comedians like Rob Schneider that I've worked with, you get into a place that, where you're a climate denier. And my only thing that I can say about that, you can have that belief and I want to understand your point of view. But the question that always gets everyone that has an extreme view, can we do better? That's the curious question. And guess what? Every happens, yes, we can do better. And that's the fact of the matter, is we stay curious. Because once we think we know something about anything, we always could be surprised that we could do better. And that's where curiosity matters.
All right. Final thoughts, plug, if you want to do your book, the new company, what do you want to plug in?
Yeah, we're creating joinextraordinary.com, and it's a nomination only network. So we're nominating extraordinary leaders that have extraordinary stories. Christine Butler and Forbes Shannon are leading that podcast. I'm in several of those podcasts where we're interviewing people for their extraordinary story. Sometimes we'll get world leaders on that podcast, and they'll think they don't have an extraordinary story. We're able to kind of create that. And the thing is most people are never asked about them being human. They're generally asked about something that they're going to extract some kind of knowledge out of someone. And we don't want to extract knowledge out of people. We understand your extraordinary journey because we believe everyone has one in it. And then, Christine and Forbes have written a lot of different books and been able to kind of create the narration to go take people from ordinary to extraordinary so that they add value in the world. They can open doors they never thought they could. Like you and I have. This is just fun. As soon as I wrote my book, I realized like my book was the best business card ever. I worked for help companies. I've got into 50 CTOs and CIOs by sending my book, CEOs. Doesn't matter who they are. You send them a book in a FedEx envelope and, they're going to be like, I'm curious. And that's where you can get anyone in the world curious about you and just have fun with it. It's really not that serious. We're in a world that regardless of how serious you take it, it's still going to unfold. You might as well be aware that there is other opportunities besides the one you think that is for you.
Well, Aaron, thank you for joining the American Conversation.
It was my pleasure to be on the American Conversation. And I know, Austin, you are going to be a force to reckon with and so excited to see this podcast unfold.